watching Study with Sudhir. This is your digital classroom. My name is T S Sudhir. We are looking at the Tempest Act 4 and this is explanation video number 3. In part 1 and part 2, we have seen the mask taking place and also what Prospero is doing through Ariel to all the other people led by King Alonso, the King of Naples. Now, in part 3, we will see what is the reaction post the ending of the mask. Okay, now in that, Ferdinand starts by saying, "This is strange, your father is in some passion that works him strongly." Basically saying that something seems to have upset your father. He's saying this to Miranda. And Miranda also agrees, saying that I have actually never seen him like this before. He has never been so angry and upset as he is now. And then Prospero says these lines, and these lines are probably one of the most important lines in the entire play. So you would need to kind of understand this well, also understand the context of these lines. Let's first understand the paraphrase of these lines. Prospero says to Ferdinand, "You do look, my son, in a moved sort as if you were dismayed." Moved sort as if you seem to be in a distressed kind of condition, because he doesn't realize that Ferdinand is actually reacting to how Prospero seems to be. "Be cheerful, sir. Our revels now are ended." That is, the masquerade has ended. "These are actors, as I foretold you, were all spirits and are melted into air, into thin air. And like the baseless fabric of this vision, the cloud-capped towers, the gorgeous palaces, the solemn temples, the great globe itself, yeah, all which it inherits shall dissolve, and like this insubstantial pageant faded, leave not a rag behind." Basically, he's telling Ferdinand, you look like something is troubling you, something is bothering you, and he asks him to cheer up. He says, our music and dance spectacle, the masquerade, is now over, and these actors, he informs him, they are basically all spirits, right? And they've all now melted into thin air, right? Like the phrase goes. And he says, just like the entire empty and this entire ungrounded, very baseless kind of vision that you have seen, with its stars which are topped with clouds, and its gorgeous palaces and solemn temples that he's talking about, and the great globe itself, the entire world itself, and everyone who is living on this earth, which will also dissolve just as this illusion of a pageant, illusion of a masquerade has also dissolved, leaving nothing, absolutely nothing, not even a cloud behind, leaving not a rack behind. So he's basically saying rack is basically a cloud formation driven by wind, and also it is reference to a stage machinery for those kind of sky effects. So he says we are all made up of dreams, and our life stretches from sleep before birth and sleep after death. So he's talking about the entire gamut of human existence on earth. These lines are important. He says, "Sir, I am upset. Sir, I am vexed." And he says, "Please put up with my weakness." Okay, so he's almost kind of giving an indication that he's an old man. He says, "My old brain is actually troubled. My old brain is troubled. Be not disturbed with my infirmity." Basically saying that do not be troubled or disturbed by my ailments, by my illness. "If you be pleased, retire into my cell and there repose." He says, if you like, you can rest for a while in my cave, in my room. He says, "A turn or two I will walk to still my beating mind. Meanwhile, I will go for a walk to calm down my very feverish mind." Okay, now apart from what I have told you in terms of paraphrasing, moved sort, I said it refers to a distressed kind of a condition. Revels essentially referring to the entertainment, basically to say that the masquerade is now over and the audience must now return to real life and not still be lost in that whole idea of whatever Ceres and Iris and Juno, all the spirits were actually doing on stage. And baseless fabric is basically a structure without any foundation and a nonsensical kind of a setup. The great globe itself. Now that's an important line, because it is also referring indirectly to the Globe Theatre, right? And that's where most of William Shakespeare's plays were actually performed, right? And that's why the reference to the Great Globe. Now, most commentators, and please note this down, most commentators have seen this speech by Prospero as William Shakespeare's own farewell to the world of theatre. So if you get this particular stanza, this particular dialogue in your examination, not only will you need to paraphrase it, you will also be expected to give the larger meaning behind this piece of dialogue, right? So it is seen as Shakespeare's farewell to the world of theatre and also to the globe theatre, right? And he says our revels are now ended, because remember, Tempest was one of his last plays that Shakespeare wrote. So in that sense, he's saying that our world of entertainment, which we had carried on for so many years through his plays, world famous plays, are now actually ended. So these are also seen as prophetic words. Prophetic means something which he can actually look into the future and predict the future, saying that since Shakespeare actually died in 1616, just a few years after the Tempest was written, and Prospero's speech therefore is seen as reflecting that he is kind of having a foreboding to his end. So that's how is the significance of this particular speech delivered by Prospero. Now, as I said, revels is a reference to the celebrations, and he's also talking about that all those people who were there, the Juno, the Ceres, Iris, etc., they were all unearthly things. They vanished from the scene, leaving absolutely no trace behind. What is the larger meaning that Shakespeare is trying to drive at? Basically saying that nothing is really permanent in this world, that we all human beings, they come with before the existence continues from sleep before birth and sleep after death. So that is almost as unreal as a dream, and our short life ends in death. So that is the finality that every human being has to deal with. He says we do not know anything about our existence before we came on this world, before our life, and we do not know anything after we have passed on, okay, after we have died. So in that sense, before and after are like two spells of sleep, and in between is his existence on earth, which is life, which is almost like a dream, right? So that is what he's talking about. So they are seen as an expression of the great truth about life and about death, and talking about the nature of human existence, and before that is between birth and death. So Shakespeare, in that sense, these are lines seen as having a universal appeal, and in the context of Shakespeare's own life, seen as prophetic in nature, and therefore they are seen as very, very quotable. Okay, so it's seen as written with a very philosophical bent of mind. Ferdinand and Miranda says, we wish you peace, that we know, we do hope that you feel better, and both of them exit the scene. Prospero, come with a thought, I thank thee, Ariel, come. So he's feeling happy and he thanks Ariel for whatever he had done. Ariel says, I do obey whatever you say, what is it that you now want? Prospero says, Spirit, we must prepare to meet with Caliban, because Caliban has been missing. So he wants to now meet Caliban, because he knows what Caliban has been up to along with Stephano and Trinculo. So Ariel says, yes, while I was actually putting up the series show, I actually thought that I will remind you about Caliban, but I did not want to upset you, given the fact that Ariel is fully aware that Prospero does not have a great liking for Caliban, right? So he did not do so lest he would make Prospero angry. Prospero says, say again, where did you leave those varlets? Now this came in I think in either the 2020 or the 2019 examination. One of the 2 years this particular part of Act 4 did come. Varlets, in fact, one of the questions asked was, what is the meaning of varlets? What does Prospero mean by varlets? It's a 1-mark question if I remember right. So you straight away need to say that is referring to the low lives and referring basically to Caliban and his two accomplices, Trinculo and Stephano. Ariel says, I told you, sir, they were red hot with drinking, so full of valor that they smote the air, for breathing in their faces, beat the ground, for kissing of their feet, yet always bending towards their project. Then I beat my tabor, at which they, like unbacked colts, they pricked their ears, advanced their eyelids, lifted up their noses as they smelt music. Now, he's saying that they were totally drunk, and we have seen that, all three of them, Caliban, Stephano and Trinculo, have been intoxicated. So he says, and they were so puffed up, so charged up, feeling extremely courageous and brave, that they were actually getting angry at the air for blowing in their faces, which shows a certain element of nonsensical behavior on part of the trio, the three of them, and they were beating the ground for touching their feet. So these are all very ridiculous things. You don't beat the ground for touching their feet. It is the feet which is on the ground. Similarly, for the air to blow in their faces, it is the face which is there with the air surrounding it, right? So yet even when drunk, they kept their plan firmly in mind. And what's the plan? We do know that they do intend to get rid of Prospero. Then I beat my drum, at which point they picked up their ears and opened their eyes. So the drum managed to kind of get them back into their senses for a moment, looking around for where is the music coming from? What is really the source of this music playing? And I enchanted them so thoroughly, then I beat my tabor, at which like unbacked colts is like a young horse, they pricked their ears, advanced their eyelids, lifted up their nose as they smelt music. Smelt music is a very nice phrase. You normally do not smell music. So Ariel is also kind of praising the quality of his own music, because it is such a great music that you could almost smell the music, not just listen to it. So I charmed their ears, so that kind of enchanted them, so that they followed me through thorny bushes. Tooth briars essentially means prickly kind of bushes. He's talking about pricking gorse, again referring to gross prickly shrubs, and thorns which entered their frail strings. So they followed me through these thorn bushes and prickly shrubs that actually tore their flesh. And in the end, I left them standing in the very smelly pond, right? The filthy mantled pool which is beyond your cell, right? Behind your room, and the stinking water is now actually covering them up right up to their chin. So they are in a very bad shape because they have landed in this extremely filthy pool which is stinking and obviously not making them feel very comfortable. Tabor is a little drum with which you kind of beat the drum. Then Prospero says, this was well done, my bird. Thy shape invisible retain thou still. The trumpery in my house, go bring it hither for steel to catch these thieves. So he says, good job, my bird. It's almost a very term of indulgence, a term of affection. And he says, you do continue to stay invisible, but in the meanwhile, bring my fancy clothes out of my house to use them as a bait, use them as a temptation in order to catch these thieves. That we will put out those fancy clothes knowing fully well that these guys will try to come and steal those fancy clothes. Ariel says, I will go, and exits, and Prospero says these lines when he's alone. A devil, a born devil, on whose nurture can never stick, on whom my pains humanly taken, all lost, quite lost. And as with age his body uglier grows, so his mind cankers. I will plague them all, even to roaring. Okay, so now what is he actually meaning? He's talking about a devil, a born devil who can never be trained. Talking about Caliban. He says all my attempts to help him in learning the language, help him in being a more civilized person, helping him in kind of understanding the virtue of doing labor, undertaken with the best intentions, though this is not something which Caliban agrees with. Caliban thinks that if it were not for Prospero, he would have been the master of this entire island. But Prospero's idea, Prospero's take on that is completely different. He says they have been completely wasted, and as his body grows uglier with age, right, his mind rots away as well. I will torment them all till they roar with pain. So he says that I will actually torment them, torture all of them till they actually roar with pain. So basically intending to kind of wanting to torture them, right? In the previous lines of Prospero, for stale to catch these thieves, basically stale means a bait, right? So that's what he says, and then Ariel enters loaded with very sparkling clothes, and he says, okay, go on and hang them on the clothesline. So that's how this explanation video number 3 ends. In explanation video number 4, we will see the entry of Caliban along with Stephano and Trinculo, and what happens, what do they try to do. We will see that in explanation video number 4, with which we will be finishing with Act 4. Thank you very much for watching.